Have you ever done something purely on instinct, something reason couldn't explain at all? It was late December on Marias Pass, Montana. No forecast had warned them about the storm. Tom and Lisa's car was stuck in the snow. There was no cell signal, and the gas needle was slowly dropping. Lisa was 8 months pregnant. By 10 o'clock that night, a hungry wolf pack had surrounded them in the dark. Tom had only one flare left. Then something stepped out from the edge of the forest, not to attack, but for a reason we may never fully understand. Hello everyone, I'm Victor, the host of Bigfoot Sasquatch Stories, where we listen to stories that stand on the line between what people believe is true and what we still aren't ready to accept. Tonight's story is a creative work of fiction. The names, locations, and events are products of imagination, inspired by the rich Bigfoot legends of North America. The images in this video were created with digital tools and artificial intelligence. What you're about to hear isn't a real documentary, it's a story, and we're telling it from the heart. Tom Waverley's story didn't begin with wolves howling, and it didn't begin with huge footprints in the snow. It began in a small kitchen in Missoula at 9 p.m., when the phone on the table started vibrating under the sound of water running in the bathroom. Tom was standing at the sink, his hands still smelling like motor oil because he had just adjusted the old heater in the garage. He saw the hospital's name on the screen, and just before he answered, something cold opened inside him. The doctor caring for Eleanor Marsh spoke gently, but that gentleness didn't make the news any less clear. Eleanor was 67, Lisa's mother, and she had spent months fighting inside a white room in Whitefish. The doctor said they couldn't be certain, but she likely had only about 3 to 6 weeks left. He told the family they should come soon if there was anything they still needed to say. Tom listened to the whole thing, thanked him, then stood frozen in the kitchen with the phone still pressed to his ear, even after the line had gone dead. He wasn't a man who knew how to show emotion easily. During the 6 months Lisa had been pregnant, Tom loved his wife more through concrete actions than through words. He painted the baby's room 3 times because the first blue felt too cold, the second cream looked too pale, and the third yellow finally made Lisa smile. He stayed up until 2 in the morning reading every line of the infant car seat manual, checking the straps so many times that Lisa joked their baby would probably be transported like military equipment. He didn't talk much about fear, but every night he kept his hand on his wife's belly for a long time, as if he were learning how to believe in a future he hadn't seen yet. Lisa came out of the bathroom with her hair still wet, an oversized sweater hanging over her belly. She saw Tom's face and understood right away that something had happened. It took Tom a few seconds before he could speak. He repeated exactly what the doctor had said, no more, no less, because he was afraid that if he added emotion, everything would break open. Lisa sat down on the edge of the bed, one hand resting on her stomach, her eyes lowered to the carpet, as if she were hearing all the years of her childhood again inside her head. Eleanor wasn't a perfect woman, but she was her mother, and there are things that, if left unsaid before it's too late, turn into stones that sit in the chest forever. "Should we go?" Lisa asked. Tom answered immediately, yes. Later, when Tom told this story, he said that it was the easiest decision of the night. He didn't think about the weather, didn't think about the distance, didn't think about the fact that Lisa was already in her 6th month and got tired more easily than before. He only saw his wife trying to hold herself together, saw the unborn child between them, and understood that if Eleanor passed before Lisa got there, he would never forgive himself for hesitating. They decided to leave at 4 o'clock the next afternoon, Thursday, December 12th. Tom called off work and told his supervisor at the construction site that there was a family emergency. Before noon, he checked the car as if preparing for a border crossing. The tires were good, the tank was full, and the oil looked fine. He packed 2 thick blankets, an emergency kit, a flashlight, a tow rope, drinking water, a few energy bars, a first aid kit, and a small folding shovel into the trunk. The forecast said there might be light snow in the higher elevations that night, but there was no storm warning. Lisa packed less than Tom did, but the one thing she brought stayed with him longer than anything in the trunk. It was a small blue teddy bear, bought at the toy store near the hospital during their most recent prenatal appointment. Lisa said she wanted her mother to hold it, so Eleanor would have something that belonged to the grandchild who hadn't been born yet. When she said it, her voice sounded normal, but Tom saw her fingers keep stroking the bear's ear over and over. He wanted to hold his wife. He wanted to tell her they would make it in time, that they would get there, that Eleanor would see her daughter and hear the baby's name. But Tom had never been good at promising things he couldn't control. He only took her bag and said the car was warm. The drive from Missoula to Whitefish on Highway 2 usually took about 2.5 hours, if the road was dry and the sun hadn't gone down yet. They had to pass through the Marias Pass area, where the elevation climbed above 5,000 feet and the weather could change as quickly as a bad thought. Tom had driven that route many times when he was working on a construction project near Kalispell. He knew the long curves, knew which stretches usually held black ice, and knew where the phone signal got weak. When they left Missoula, the sky was still gray with daylight. The city behind them sat under the cold evening light of December, and the low buildings, gas stations, parking lots, and roadside signs slowly disappeared in the rearview mirror. Lisa sat in the passenger seat, one hand holding the blue teddy bear and the other moving to her belly whenever the baby shifted. Tom lowered the heat because she said the warmth was making her sleepy. At first they talked about ordinary things to avoid the heaviest one. Lisa said her mother had always hated girls' names that started with J because there had been 3 girls named Judy in her childhood class, and all of them had been loud. Tom laughed and said that probably ruled out his choice, June. Lisa said maybe not, because Eleanor was weak now and might forgive the letter J. Then she said she liked the name Cora because it sounded soft without sounding fragile. Tom said Cora sounded like the name of a girl who would grow up knowing how to change a tire. Lisa truly laughed for the first time since the night before. They still hadn't decided. Both of them knew why. Their baby's name wasn't just a cute choice on a birth certificate. It was something they wanted to place in Eleanor's hands while she could still hear it. A small, late gift, but still alive. Tom didn't say that out loud, but he badly wanted Lisa to have that moment, because he understood a child carries something like that far longer than a funeral. As they drove beyond the city lights, the landscape opened into dark hills, frozen grassland, and black lines of pines standing still beneath the mountains. The sky kept getting darker. Low clouds began moving in from the west, covering the last of the day's light. Tom turned on the headlights early, not because he was worried, but out of habit. Lisa leaned her head against the window, watching old patches of snow along the road. Now and then, she asked how much longer. Tom said if the road stayed good, about 2 hours. Then he added, "We'll make it in time." That sentence made both of them go quiet for a while. I think about that moment a lot whenever I hear Tom tell the story. Some of the biggest stories in a person's life begin inside a family car with a sentence so ordinary that the person saying it doesn't know they'll remember it forever. Tom and Lisa didn't drive into that night looking for anything strange. They weren't looking for Bigfoot, weren't looking for a legend, and weren't looking for answers to any mystery in the wilderness. They were only trying to do something deeply human, reach a mother before it was too late. A little before 6:30, they stopped at a small gas station so Lisa could use the restroom and buy more water. Tom used the time to check the forecast again on his phone. The weather icon still showed only light snow in the mountains after 9 o'clock that night. The gas station clerk said the road north was a little slick, but cars were still getting through. Tom bought an extra bag of salted crackers and 2 cups of coffee, even though Lisa reminded him that too much coffee would only make him more tense. By the time the car got back on the road, the darkness had grown thicker. Highway 2 stretched ahead like a wet black ribbon, with tall tree trunks rising higher on both sides as the elevation climbed. Lisa called the hospital and asked the night nurse whether Eleanor was awake. Tom heard only pieces. Her mother was sleeping a lot, her blood pressure was stable, and if they arrived late, they could still come in to visit. Lisa thanked the nurse and ended the call. She kept the phone in her hand, staring at the dark screen. Tom wanted to ask if she was okay, but the question felt too small beside what they were driving toward. He only reached over, held her hand for a few seconds, then put his hand back on the wheel. That was the last image of the drive, before the forest began to change. Tom's hand on the steering wheel, Lisa's warm hand in his, the blue teddy bear resting on her lap, and the unnamed baby, quiet between them. Outside the windows, the Montana night closed in, layer by layer, slowly, without warning. The distant peaks disappeared behind clouds. The wind began pushing the first snowflakes through the headlights. At first, they were tiny, sparse, and almost beautiful, like a gentle reminder that winter was still there. Tom didn't know that in less than 1 hour, the road to Lisa's mother would become the road into a memory that would stay with him for the rest of his life. He didn't know their small car would get trapped halfway up the pass, didn't know a hungry wolf pack would come out of the trees, and he especially didn't know that a giant reddish-brown creature, carrying a grief of its own, would stand in a snowstorm to guard his wife and child. At that moment, Tom only looked forward, kept the speed steady, and told himself that if the weather gave them any mercy, they would reach Whitefish before Lisa's mother slipped into the deepest sleep of that night. The snow began falling for real, just as Tom's and Lisa's car climbed above 4,000 feet. At first, it was only a few thin white flakes sliding through the headlights. Lisa leaned back in the passenger seat, one hand on her belly, the other holding the blue teddy bear. But within minutes, those small flakes thickened into a white curtain, rolling straight into the windshield. Tom turned the wipers higher. The blades scraped across the wet snow, but the glass clouded over again almost immediately. The headlights no longer reached far down the road, they only lit a moving white wall. He slowed to 30 miles an hour, then 25. Lisa sat up straighter and looked out through the right side window. "The forecast said light snow," she said. Tom didn't answer right away. He was watching the yellow center line, trying to keep it in view. That line appeared and vanished under the fresh snow. He turned on the fog lights and dropped to 15 miles an hour. The car crawled through the night. The GPS lost signal just after they passed a long curve between two black walls of trees. The screen froze, the blue arrow blinking at a meaningless point, then showed that it was searching for a route. The cell signal weakened too, dropping to 1 bar before disappearing completely. "Maybe we should stop for a little while," Lisa said. Her voice was still calm, but Tom heard the tension tucked underneath it. "Wait for the snow to ease up, then keep going." Tom looked at the dashboard clock. 7:38. His mind started calculating right away. If they had already passed the highest stretch near Marias Pass, Whitefish was maybe 40 minutes away in normal conditions. Even slowly, maybe a little over an hour. Eleanor was in the hospital, and she might sleep more heavily tonight. Lisa needed to get there. Turning back wasn't safer. Stopping on the shoulder in a snowstorm wasn't necessarily better either. Years later, Tom said that was the part that bothered him most. "We'll keep going slow," he said. "If I see a safe place to pull off, I'll stop. But not right here. I can't even see the shoulder." Lisa nodded, but her hand tightened around the blue teddy bear. Tom noticed it, then immediately looked back at the road so he wouldn't have to see the fear in his wife's eyes. He wanted to seem certain, the way he always tried to fix broken things in their life. But outside, there were mountains, ice, snow, and darkness. None of them cared that he wanted to be a reliable husband. Within 15 minutes, visibility dropped to less than 20 feet. Wind cut sideways across the road, pushing snow into white streams that ran close to the ground like smoke. Tom could no longer tell where the shoulder ended and where the snow ditch began. He was driving more by feel than sight, keeping the car in the dark strip he believed was pavement. Each time the tires touched the edge of deeper snow, the whole car shuddered slightly. Lisa stopped talking. Inside the car, there was only the scrape of the wipers, the fan blowing heat, and both of them trying to keep their breathing steady. The curve happened almost gently, and that made it more frightening. There was no explosion, no violent loss of control, just a bend to the right, the kind every mountain driver knows. Tom turned the wheel slowly. He didn't slam the brakes. He didn't speed up. But beneath the fresh snow was a thin sheet of ice that the headlights couldn't show him. The rear tires lost grip first. The back of the car slid left. Tom immediately steered into it, and a small "no" escaped his mouth. The car rotated halfway across the road. Lisa cried out, one hand wrapping over her belly, the other grabbing the door handle. Tom tapped the brake, then released it, trying to regain the line. But the right front tire had already slipped off the edge of the road. The whole car tilted down and slid slowly but helplessly into a deep snowbank along the shoulder. Snow packed under the frame with a thick, heavy sound. One final jolt threw them forward against their seatbelts, and then everything stopped. For a few seconds, they only sat there. The engine was still running, the headlights pointed straight into a wall of snow in front of the car. Tom looked at his hands on the steering wheel and realized his fingers had gone white. "Are you okay?" he asked, turning toward Lisa so fast that pain shot through his neck. Lisa exhaled and nodded, but her face had gone pale. "I'm okay," she said. "The baby's okay too, I think." The words, "I think," moved through Tom more sharply than the cold outside. He unbuckled his seatbelt, reached over to touch her shoulder, then looked down at her stomach. Lisa placed her hand over his. "Tom, don't panic. It just scared me." He nodded, but his mind was already running through everything he had to do. Check the car, check the tires, see if he could back out, keep the heat on, and call for help if there was a signal. He shifted into reverse and pressed the gas very gently. The tires spun and whined beneath the snow, but the car didn't move. He tried again, feathering the pedal this time, but the sound only got worse. The front tires dug deeper, the body shivered, and the car sank a little more. "Don't," Lisa said. "I think it's sinking." Tom stopped. He grabbed the flashlight from the door pocket, pulled his knit cap down low, and opened the door to step outside. The wind hit him in the face so hard he almost couldn't breathe. 12 below air bit through his gloves within seconds. Snow reached his calves. He shut the door quickly to keep the warmth inside for Lisa, then bent to look at the front tire. The flashlight beam cut through sideways snow and showed the right tire buried all the way to the axle. Tom pushed through the snow to the trunk and pulled out the folding shovel. Even those few steps told him the worst thing. The wind was erasing the tire tracks almost immediately. If another car came through, they might not be seen until it was too close. He shoveled around the tire for 10 minutes. Sweat soaked into the back of his shirt, even though his face was numb. Every time he cleared a pocket, the wind threw fresh snow back into it. He shoved a rubber floor mat under the tire for traction, got back into the driver's seat, and tried reverse again. The tire spun, the mat shot backward, and the car rocked hard, then stayed still. Tom hit the steering wheel with his palm. Not hard, but hard enough for Lisa to look at him. "Sorry," he said immediately. "Don't apologize," Lisa answered. "How much gas do we have?" Tom checked the fuel gauge. More than half a tank. "We're okay. The heat can run for a long while if we're careful." He said it as if he had a clear plan. In truth, all he knew was that they had to stay warm. He took out his phone. No signal. He cracked the window and held the phone outside. Nothing. Lisa tried too. Nothing. Tom sat back behind the wheel, closed the door, locked the car, and turned the heat all the way up for a few minutes. Lisa pulled the blanket over her lap. The blue teddy bear was wedged between her belly and the blanket. Tom watched her, trying to read every sign on her face. "Are you hurting anywhere?" "Just my back a little," Lisa said. "Probably from stress and sitting too long." Tom wanted to ask more. What kind of pain? Was it different from before? But the questions stuck in his throat. He was afraid that if he named it, it would become real. So he only nodded, tucked the blanket around Lisa's shoulders, and told her they would wait for the storm to calm down a little. If a car passed, he would go out and wave. If not, when the snow stopped in the morning, he would go find a signal or the nearest house. But beyond the windshield, there were no cars, no headlights, no house lights, no clear mile markers. Snow covered everything, erasing the road behind them and ahead of them. Time inside the car began to warp. 8:20, 8:47, 9:05. Tom checked his phone every 5 minutes, even though he knew it was useless. Lisa tried calling the hospital 3 more times, then set the phone down, her eyes wet but not crying. She said her mother would be worried. Tom said Eleanor would call the police if they didn't arrive. Lisa answered that her mother was tired and might fall asleep. Both of them knew that could be true. Around 9:30, Lisa let out a slower breath, her hand resting under her lower back. Tom turned toward her at once. "How's your back?" "Same," she said too quickly. Then, after a pause, she corrected herself. "A little more uncomfortable, but I'm probably fine." Tom nodded, but this time he didn't fully believe her. He remembered the childbirth class from last month, remembered the instructor saying not every pain looked like it did in the movies, that the body could give early signs, and that stress and cold could make things unpredictable. He looked outside. Part of him wanted to walk into the storm and look for a signal. Another part knew leaving Lisa alone right now was impossible. He pulled the emergency kit from the back seat and checked each item just to keep his hands busy. A flashlight, spare batteries, a tow rope, bandages, flares, a small knife, and energy bars. Lisa watched him dig through it and said, "Tom," he stopped. "I know you're trying not to be scared," she said. That hurt him. He turned back to his wife. In the weak dome light, Lisa looked strong and fragile at the same time, in a way that made his chest feel heavy. He held her hand. "I'm scared," he said, very softly. "But I'm here." Lisa nodded. She closed her eyes for a few seconds, then opened them again. "Then we'll stay here, 1 minute at a time." I think that was when the night truly began. Not when the car slid off the road, not when the GPS loses signal. It was the moment Tom and Lisa understood they were no longer in control of the trip. Every preparation, every calculation, every forecast, every plan to reach the hospital had been buried under the white snow outside the windows. All that remained was them, the weak warmth inside the car, more than half a tank of gas, a blue teddy bear, and an unborn child inside a mother who was beginning to feel pain on a mountain pass in Montana. Tom looked ahead, where the headlights only showed an endless white sheet. He didn't know the wolves had already started moving through the nearby forest. He didn't know there was a creature out there, bigger than any fear he had ever imagined, standing silently somewhere inside the storm. He only knew he had taken his wife into a decision he would replay for the rest of his life, and if something came out of the dark tonight, he might not be strong enough to stop it. Tom saw the first shadow close to 10 o'clock that night, just after he had turned the heater off for a few minutes to save gas. The car grew cold almost immediately, not the skin-cutting cold outside, but the quiet kind that slipped through the glass, through the door seams, and through the spaces between husband and wife when neither of them knew what else to say. Lisa sat in the passenger seat, the blanket pulled up to her chest, one hand on her belly, the other holding the blue teddy bear. She had stopped talking about Eleanor. Tom didn't mention Whitefish anymore either. Both of them understood the road had disappeared from their lives for the moment, at least for that night. The shadow passed along the left side of the windshield, low, visible for only a moment inside the snow. Tom thought it might have been a branch thrown by the wind, but then he realized branches didn't move against the wind. It came from behind the car toward the front, stopped just outside the weak edge of the headlights, then vanished into the white wall. Tom sat up straight. Every sense in him tightened, the way it did on a job site when he heard stressed steel begin to crack before anyone else noticed danger. "What is it?" Lisa asked. "I'm not sure," Tom said. He didn't want to use the word animal. He didn't want to say anything that would make the air inside the car feel even smaller. He turned the high beams on for a few seconds. The white light slammed into the snow and bounced back so hard he had to narrow his eyes. He saw nothing except flakes cutting sideways like ground glass. He turned the high beams off and left only the low beams and fog lights. A second shadow appeared on the right, closer this time. Now Tom saw the gray back, the lowered head, and the tail stretched straight behind the body. It moved slowly around the front of the car, not rushed, not startled. Then one pair of yellow eyes flashed in the dark, then another pair behind it. Lisa drew in a tiny breath, so quiet the wind almost swallowed it. Tom turned off the interior light. Darkness filled the cabin, leaving only the faint blue glow from the dashboard and the dull shine of snow outside the glass. As his eyes adjusted, he started counting. One wolf stood to the left of the hood, one lower shape near the tree line, two more behind the snowbank on the right. Then longer gray movements slid silently past the rear window. 5, 6, maybe 7. Montana gray wolves. Not shadows from a campfire story. Not distant howls on a TV documentary. They were real, hungry, patient, and circling the trapped car the way they might circle an animal stuck in a snare. Tom hit the horn. The sharp sound tore through the snowy night. Lisa flinched, but she didn't say anything. The wolves backed away at once, melting into the dark edges like smoke being pushed off. Tom held the horn for several more seconds, then flashed the headlights again and again. Light swept across snow, tree trunks, and pairs of eyes that appeared and disappeared. For a few minutes, none of them came close. Tom allowed himself to breathe out, but then the largest one stepped back into view. It stood directly in front of the car, about 20 feet from the hood. It was bigger than the others, with thick fur around its neck, high shoulders, and a long muzzle dusted with snow. It didn't bark, didn't howl, and didn't growl loudly. It only looked through the windshield, straight at Tom, as if the horn and headlights weren't enough to convince it that the thing inside was still dangerous. That chilled Tom more than the temperature outside. Wolves usually avoid people, but a storm, hunger, and an immobilized car could blur that line. Lisa whispered, "Are they going to leave?" Tom didn't answer right away. He was watching how the others spread wider. They didn't crowd from one side. They kept their distance, circled behind the car, then pulled back, testing reactions. He had watched enough nature documentaries to know this wasn't simple curiosity. This was an assessment. They were learning the car, learning the horn, learning the light, and learning whether something inside would weaken first. "I'm going to scare them off a little more," Tom said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We have flares in the emergency kit." He reached into the back seat and pulled the kit forward. His fingers moved so quickly that he dropped a pack of bandages onto the floor. He dug past the flashlight, tow rope, energy bars, and small knife, and then found 2 red flares sealed in plastic. Only 2. Tom looked at them like he was staring at the last 2 matches in a freezing house. Lisa looked at him, her eyes wide in the dark. "Don't go outside," she said. "I'm not going outside." Tom swallowed. "I'm only going to crack the window." He started the engine again and turned on the heat while lowering his window about 4 inches. Cold air rushed in at once, carrying fine snow against his face. A thin hiss formed around the crack in the glass. The wolves reacted immediately. The leader lowered its body, ears lifting. Tom snapped the cap off the first flare, his hand shaking so badly he had to try twice before it caught. When the tip ignited, red fire burst up, violent and hot, staining the whole cabin the color of dark blood. Tom pushed his arm through the gap and held the flare as far from the car as he could. The red light hissed in the snow, smoke curling back into the wind. The wolves retreated faster than they had from the horn. One turned and ran close to the tree line. Another crouched low, showing teeth at the light. The leader stepped back 3 paces, but it still didn't leave. It moved across the front of the car, staying just beyond Tom's reach. its eyes never leaving the burning stick. "Go," Tom said through clenched teeth. "Please, just go." The flare burned for several minutes. During that time, Tom felt as if he had regained some small piece of control. The red light blazed across the snow and made the gray shapes shrink away. He thought maybe they would lose patience, but as the flare shortened and the light weakened, the wolves began appearing again, one by one, at the edge of the glow. Not charging, not hurrying, just waiting. Tom threw the dying flare down in front of the car. It landed in the snow, smoked red for a little while longer, then faded down. The darkness came back almost at once. Inside the car, the smell of flare smoke clung to Tom's gloves. He rolled the window up, locked it, and held the last flare on his lap. Lisa looked at it, then at the clock. 10:48. She didn't say anything, but Tom saw that the hand on her belly had changed position. She wasn't only supporting her lower back now, she was listening to her body in a way that scared him. "Lisa?" he asked. "I'm okay," she said. But this time she didn't answer quickly enough to convince him. She inhaled, exhaled slowly, then inhaled again. That breathing had become more even than before, shorter and more controlled. Tom had heard that rhythm in the childbirth class when the instructor told the husbands not to panic if they saw their wives begin to breathe that way. He had laughed then, holding a practice pillow, thinking it would be a long time before he needed to remember. Now Lisa's breathing sounded small inside the dark car, clearer than the snow striking the glass. "That's just back pain, right?" Tom asked, even though he knew how bad the question was. Lisa turned and looked at him. In the weak dashboard light, her face looked paler, but her eyes were clear. "I don't know." Those 3 words took the rest of Tom's calm away. He looked outside, at the wolves, at the clock, at the phone with no signal. Every option was bad. If they stayed in the car, they had heat, but no idea how long they would have to wait. If he went out to look for a signal, Lisa would be alone with the wolves and the pains that were growing. If he used the last flare too soon, he would have nothing left when they came closer. If he kept it, he had to sit there and watch the wolves learn how not to fear the car. The leader came closer again. It didn't stand in front of the hood this time, but circled toward Lisa's side, where the snow had piled up nearly to the door. Tom hit the horn. It jumped back, but only for a few seconds, then returned to the same distance. The others started testing different angles too. One stepped onto the snowbank behind them, high enough that Tom could see its shape through the rear window. He tapped the brakes and hit the horn again. Lisa curled slightly, not because of the wolves, but because of another pain. Tom heard her breathe out through her teeth. "I have to do something," he said. "Don't go outside," Lisa said again, faster this time. Tom didn't answer. He looked at the last flare, then at the door handle. A thought formed in his mind, so desperate that it frightened him. If he opened the door, stepped out, lit the flare, and ran toward the trees, maybe the wolves would follow him. Maybe he could lead them far enough away that Lisa would be safer in the car for a while. Maybe he could climb back to the main road, find a signal, and call for help. Or maybe he would fall in the snow within 30 yards, and Lisa would have to hear what came next without being able to do anything. He imagined that and still put his hand on the lock. Not because he was brave. Years later, Tom said it wasn't bravery, it was fear turning into a kind of hopeless math. One man, one pregnant wife, one unborn baby, a wolf pack, and one last flare. If someone had to step outside, it was going to be him. The only question was whether that act would save anyone or just make everything worse. Lisa grabbed his wrist, not hard, but enough to pull him back. "Tom," she said. Just his name, no pleading, no scolding, but inside that sound was their whole marriage, the yellow nursery, the blue teddy bear, Eleanor waiting in Whitefish, and the baby with no name lying between the first panes. Tom closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, the leader had stopped in front of the car again. It lowered its head, sniffed the snow, then raised its eyes to them. The pack closed in tighter. There wasn't much space left between the yellow eyes and the car's weak lights. The final flare lay in Tom's hand, cold in its casing, hot inside his imagination. He knew he had only one chance left to push them back. He was about to lower the window when the entire pack stopped. Not because of Tom, not because of the lights, not because of the horn. Something had just touched the forest from the left, where the dark pines stood thick behind the snow. The leader snapped its head toward that direction. The others froze too, ears pressed down, the fur along their backs lifting into sharp gray ridges. Inside the car, Lisa held her breath. Tom didn't dare move either. The sound that came after was so low that Tom wasn't sure whether he heard it with his ears or his chest. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a tree breaking in the storm. It was a deep vibration, long and heavy, carrying the weight of stone, wind, and some huge body standing just beyond sight. The entire wolf pack, the same pack that had driven Tom close enough to despair that he almost stepped into the storm, immediately backed away half a step. Tom looked at Lisa. She was staring toward the forest on the left too, one hand holding her belly, the other gripping the blue teddy bear. Outside, the snow still fell hard, but the circle had stopped moving, and in the darkness between the trunks, something larger than the wolves was beginning to step out. The sound wasn't like any roar Tom had ever heard. It didn't burst out like a predator charging to attack, and it didn't break apart like a tree falling in a storm. It was low, drawn out, spreading through the snow in a way that made his chest vibrate before his ears fully understood it. Years later, Tom described that sound as more of a statement than a threat, as if some creature out in the forest had just said to the wolves, "I'm here." The wolves reacted before Tom saw anything. The leader whipped around toward the forest on the left, its whole body lowered. The others stopped too, the fur along their necks raised into sharp gray lines, their ears flattened against their heads. The circle around the car suddenly loosened, but none of them ran. They stood in the snow like hungry ghosts caught between two opposing forces, the instinct to hunt pulling them toward the car, and a deeper fear pulling them toward the darkness. Tom still held the last flare. The hard plastic casing felt cold under his shaking fingers. He didn't dare lower the window anymore. Lisa sat beside him, one hand on her belly, the other clenched around the blue teddy bear. She didn't ask what that sound was. Tom didn't say anything either. There are moments when language becomes useless, because both people know something else has just entered their story. The curtain of snow to the left of the car began to move. At first it was the slow shifting of a dark mass so large that Tom's eyes couldn't separate it from the pines behind it. Then a shoulder appeared, followed by a long arm, covered in dark reddish-brown fur. The whole body stepped across the edge of the headlights, each heavy footfall pressing down into the snow as if the ground had to make room for it. A female Bigfoot stepped out of the forest. Tom didn't know why he recognized it as female in those first seconds, but he said the feeling came from the whole shape of its stance. It stood about 8.5 feet tall, with unusually broad shoulders and a thick, powerful body. But it didn't have the raw, explosive posture of a male trying to prove territory. Dark reddish-brown fur covered it from head to foot, thicker across the shoulders and arms, with snow clinging in white streaks over its head, back, and neck. Around the lower belly, Tom caught a glimpse of lighter, thinner fur, like the trace of a body that had once carried or nursed young. It didn't look at the car first. It looked at the lead wolf. That frightened Tom even more. If it had stepped out from curiosity, maybe it would have looked at the lights, at the people in the car, at the piece of metal trapped by the roadside. But it didn't care about those things first. It knew exactly where the danger was. The lead wolf knew too. It stood between the hood and the Bigfoot, body lowered, muzzle wrinkled, breath coming out in small clouds in the night. It didn't retreat. Maybe hunger had pushed it past a line it normally wouldn't cross. Maybe, In that moment, it still believed numbers could beat size. The female Bigfoot stopped about 30 feet from the car, slightly forward of the hood. It stood between Tom, Lisa, and the wolves, but it still didn't come closer. The two creatures stared at each other for several long seconds. Snow fell through the space between them, thick and small, like a stage curtain, about to open on something no one inside the car wanted to witness. Tom heard Lisa breathing in shorter rhythms. He wanted to ask if she was okay, but he couldn't take his eyes off the forest. The lead wolf attacked first. It didn't go for Bigfoot's face or throat. It dropped low and shot straight toward the front leg, so fast Tom only saw a gray streak cutting through the snow. At the same time, two others rushed in from both sides, trying to split the giant creature's attention. The Bigfoot didn't dodge. It turned its hips and swept its left arm sideways. The movement didn't look like a wild strike. It looked like a living tree sweeping through the wind. The wolf on the left was knocked off its line, rolled through the deep snow, then sprang back up and staggered out of the light. The leader reached the Bigfoot's lower leg. Tom heard a heavy impact, low, traveling through the snow and thudding under the car. The Bigfoot stamped its right foot to keep its balance. Snow burst in every direction, fogging the windshield for a moment. Lisa flinched, and Tom instinctively put one hand in front of her, even though they were both still inside the car. The Bigfoot didn't step away from its position. It leaned down and pushed the leader away with its right hand, not gripping it tightly, only forcing it off the leg enough to stop the next pull. The wolves didn't give up. They didn't fight like separate animals. They moved like a living circle, one stepping in whenever another pulled back. One lunged toward the left shoulder, then withdrew just before the Bigfoot could turn fully. Another slipped behind it, trying to get toward Lisa's door. The Bigfoot shifted at once and blocked it. That was when Tom understood, after several minutes of terror. It wasn't trying to win by chasing them down. It was only holding an invisible line between the pack and the car. Every time a wolf retreated toward the trees, the Bigfoot didn't follow. It returned to the same position, shoulders angled toward the car, face toward the pack. Every time one tried to circle behind, it took one step, enough to block, no more. That restraint confused Tom even through his fear. A creature that huge could have turned the whole fight into a storm of rage if it wanted to. But it didn't. It used its strength like a door, closing every way into the car. Lisa whispered Tom's name. He looked at her for only a second. Her face had gone pale in the dashboard light. She was breathing evenly, short and controlled, but there was a fear in her eyes that wasn't the same as the fear of wolves. Tom looked down at her hand on her stomach and understood she was trying to stay calm for two reasons at once. Outside, the forest was fighting so they could live. Inside, her body was warning her that tonight wasn't only about surviving the wolves. A heavy collision pulled Tom's eyes back to the front. The lead wolf had rushed in for the second time, now timed with two others from the left. The Bigfoot turned half a beat too slowly. One wolf reached its left shoulder and clung there for one short moment. The Bigfoot roared, not high, not shrill, but so deep the windows trembled faintly. It swung its right arm, forcing the wolf to let go and fall back. The fur around the Bigfoot's left shoulder looked darker now, matted with snow and steam. Tom couldn't see the details, but he understood it had been hurt. "God," Lisa said very softly. Tom didn't know whether she said it because of what was happening outside or because of the pain inside her. Maybe both. He wanted to light the last flare and help, but he didn't know what help would even mean. If he cracked the window, the red light might confuse the wolves, but it could also distract the Bigfoot or pull attention toward the car. He sat frozen, trapped in the role of a helpless witness. A creature he didn't even have a name for was out there taking blows for his family, and he couldn't do anything except hold his wife's hand. The wolves began changing tactics. They stopped rushing in at the same time and started trying to wear it down. One came close, forcing the Bigfoot to turn its head. Another immediately moved to the opposite side. The leader waited for the smallest opening. Wave after wave, rhythm after rhythm, like water wearing down stone. The female Bigfoot was breathing harder. Its breath rose in thick white clouds around its face. Every time it planted a foot, the snow compressed into a deep hole. But it still didn't give up the line. Tom remembered later that this was when he thought of Eleanor. He thought of a mother lying in Whitefish, waiting for her daughter to arrive. He thought of Lisa inside the car, becoming a mother minute by minute. He thought of the female creature outside, with lighter fur under her belly, standing between the wolves and an unborn baby. He didn't understand the connection, but he felt something tying them together, thin and beyond reason. The struggle lasted longer than Tom expected. In his memory, time no longer moved by the clock. It moved by each time the Bigfoot turned, by each wolf's sharp sound in the snow, by each breath Lisa took beside him. The final flare still lay on his lap. The phone still had no signal. Outside, the forest was no longer scenery. It had become a white arena where every living thing had to decide whether to move forward or step back. Then the decisive moment came. The lead wolf pulled farther away than before, disappearing from the light for several seconds. Two smaller wolves immediately rushed toward the Bigfoot's left side, one aiming at the injured shoulder and the other lower, at the leg. The Bigfoot turned toward them on instinct, exposing a gap on the right. Tom saw the leader reappear through that exact opening, fast and low, running straight toward Lisa's door. "No!" Tom shouted. He grabbed the flare, but he couldn't get the window down in time. The Bigfoot saw it too. In a movement that was both awkward and powerful, it twisted its entire massive body to the right, ignoring the two wolves attacking from the left. Its right hand swept down just as the leader shot past. Snow flew up, and the car trembled faintly as the force traveled through the ground. The Bigfoot caught the wolf across the back and shoulder and lifted it out of the snow. Inside the car, Lisa covered her mouth. Tom froze, waiting for a scene he didn't want to see. But the Bigfoot didn't do what he feared. It held the wolf in the air for several seconds, high enough for the pack to see, firmly enough that the leader stopped fighting. It didn't squeeze hard enough to destroy it, didn't slam it into the rocks, didn't pour anger into the moment. It only held it. An act of total dominance, controlled in a way that felt almost impossible. The leader made a short, low sound, not a howl, something closer to surrender. The two wolves on the left backed away. The rest of the pack stopped too. The Bigfoot stood in the snow, its left shoulder shaking from the wound, its right hand still holding the pack leader, its eyes fixed on the gray circle around it. The whole forest seemed to hold still. Then it bent down and set the leader on the snow. It didn't drop it, didn't throw it. It set it down. Tom said that was the image he remembered most clearly, clearer than the roar, clearer than the yellow eyes, clearer than every impact against the car windows. Because in that moment, the Bigfoot had won. It could have ended the leader. It could have turned fear into a lesson no wolf would forget. But it chose something else. It placed its opponent down as if it had decided from the beginning that nothing needed to die that night to prove anything. The lead wolf lay still for 1 second, then got up. It no longer looked at the car. It looked at the Bigfoot, ears flattened, body lowered. Then it turned and ran toward the forest. Another wolf followed at once, then a third. One gray shadow after another withdrew from the circle of light and vanished into the snow between the trees. There was no more howling, no clear signal except that the leader had left. The circle dissolved as if it had never existed, leaving behind the white road, the trapped car, and a reddish-brown creature standing in the night, breathing hard. Tom still couldn't move. Lisa let out a long breath, then immediately drew another in with a different rhythm, shorter and tighter. He turned to her. "Lisa?" She nodded, but tears had gathered at the corners of her eyes. "I'm still okay," she said, then stopped. "But Tom, this doesn't feel like back pain anymore." That sentence should have made him fully panic, but outside, the Bigfoot was still standing in the snow. It didn't turn back right away. It watched the direction where the wolves had vanished, and stood motionless until the forest over there went completely still. Snow gathered on its shoulders. Its breathing was still heavy. Its left shoulder sat slightly lower than the right, but it didn't leave. Tom slowly placed the unused flare on the dashboard. He didn't know what he was supposed to do next. There was no signal to call anyone. The car was still stuck. Going outside was impossible. Lisa needed him, but part of him was still held by the creature standing in front of the hood. He had never seen anything so frightening and so beautiful at the same time. Not beautiful in a gentle way. Beautiful the way a mountain is beautiful in a storm, too large to care about people, and yet tonight somehow standing on their side. At last, the Bigfoot turned its head. Slowly, it looked at the car for the first time since it had appeared. Its eyes caught the headlights in a dark amber color, deep and tired. Tom felt Lisa take his hand. He squeezed back. The fear of the wolves gave way to another fear. What did the creature that had just saved them want? The Bigfoot took one step toward the car. The snow compressed beneath its large foot. The ground trembled faintly. Tom could see the dark reddish-brown fur packed with snow, the darker area around its left shoulder, and the long arm hanging low near the knees. It moved slowly, without any hunting posture. Lisa didn't look away from it. A contraction came, and she closed her eyes for a second, then opened them and breathed through it. Tom realized this night had just closed one danger, but another threshold was opening inside the car. The creature stopped in front of the hood and looked through the windshield. It didn't touch the car, didn't tap on the glass, didn't roar, didn't tilt its head like a curious animal. It only stood there, watching Tom and Lisa for several long seconds. Then its gaze moved away from Tom. It turned toward Lisa. Tom felt every muscle in his body tighten. The Bigfoot stepped toward the passenger side door, where Lisa sat. Outside, the snow had piled up almost halfway up the door. The creature bent down very slowly until its face was level with the side window. The weak interior light, which Tom had turned on by instinct, reflected in its eyes. That amber color didn't look like wolf eyes. It wasn't sharp, wasn't hungry, and wasn't calculating like the leader's stare. It was sadder, deeper, and in a way Tom couldn't explain, almost recognizing something. It didn't look at Lisa's face first. It looked at her belly. Inside the car, Lisa went still. Her hand was resting on her stomach. The blue teddy bear was tucked under her elbow. She later said she didn't feel afraid in that moment, or if she did, the fear sat far behind another feeling she couldn't name. The female Bigfoot stood outside the glass, snow on her head and shoulders, carrying the heavy breath of the fight she had just survived. She looked at Lisa's belly the way someone might look at a small flame in the night, something fragile that the whole forest had suddenly turned around to protect. Tom didn't know how long that lasted. He only remembered counting his own breaths so he wouldn't lose control. 1, 2, 3. Past 10 breaths, the Bigfoot still stood there. Lisa slowly placed both hands on her belly, not to hide it, but with the ancient reflex of a mother. The creature's amber eyes lifted to her face. No words, no clear gesture, only a pause that touched something Tom had never believed could exist between human beings and a creature from legend. Then the Bigfoot stepped back. It didn't return to the forest. It moved to the front of the car, past the old burned-out flare mark, and sat down in the snow. Its back faced Tom and Lisa, and its face turned toward the white road and the tree line where the wolves had vanished. The posture was so clear that Tom didn't need to interpret it. She wasn't leaving. She would stay there. Lisa exhaled shakily. "Tom," she said. He turned to his wife. She looked at him, frightened and strangely calm at the same time. "I think she's coming." The words, "she is," made Tom feel as if he stopped breathing. They hadn't decided on a name. They hadn't reached the hospital. They hadn't seen Eleanor. They were trapped on Marias Pass, in a car half buried in snow, with a female Bigfoot sitting outside like an uninvited guard. He looked at Lisa, then through the windshield. The reddish-brown shape sat motionless in the snow, wide and steady as a wall. Behind it, the Montana forest was black. In front of Tom, the storm had just become the place where his daughter might be born. He swallowed, took Lisa's hand, and forced his voice to sound as steady as he could make it. "I'm here," Tom said. "I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the Bigfoot didn't turn around. She only sat in the wind and snow, as if she understood that the small life coming tonight mattered more than anything else. Lisa closed her eyes and breathed in rhythm. Tom turned on the light. He didn't understand why the creature stayed. He only knew the forest had sent them a silent guard, wounded but still there. After the wolves disappeared into the forest, the night didn't return to normal. It only changed into a different kind of quiet, heavier than before. The car sat trapped in the snow, the engine trembling softly. The female Bigfoot stood in the curtain of falling snow, her breath rolling out in white smoke. Her left shoulder sat lower than her right, and the dark reddish-brown fur there looked matted, but she didn't bend down and didn't show any sign that she wanted to leave. Tom sat frozen behind the wheel, one hand holding Lisa's, the other still close to the flare. The thing that had driven the wolf pack off that Montana pass was larger than any fear he had ever pictured. But what kept Tom from breathing too hard wasn't only her size. It was the way she stood there after the fight, without display, without claiming victory, as if what had just happened was simply something that had to be done. Lisa squeezed his hand. She didn't speak. In the dim darkness inside the car, her face looked pale, and a thin layer of sweat had formed on her forehead, even though the cold kept seeping through the glass. Tom turned to look at his wife, but before he could ask anything, the female Bigfoot turned her head toward the car. Her eyes caught the headlights and the weak interior light, glowing amber, unlike the eyes of the wolves, unlike the eyes of any animal Tom had ever seen this close. She stepped forward slowly. Snow pressed down beneath her large feet with a heavy crunch. Her reddish-brown body became clearer as she moved into the light. Tom saw snow clinging to her shoulders and to the long arms hanging near her knees. He also saw the thinner, lighter patch of fur low on her belly. That strange detail he would never forget later. It made the massive creature suddenly feel like more than a legend. It was a living body that had carried something private, had once carried or nursed a smaller life. The Bigfoot stopped beside the passenger door, right next to Lisa. Tom instinctively leaned toward his wife, but he didn't hit the horn, didn't touch the lock, and didn't light the flare. Some part of him understood that any panicked reaction now could break the fragile quiet that was keeping them alive. The creature bent down and brought her large face level with the glass. Her breath fogged a pale mark across the outside of the window. Lisa didn't pull away. Later she told Tom she didn't understand why she wasn't as afraid as she should have been. She knew the thing outside could tear through metal if it wanted to. She knew no one could hear them, that there was no cell signal, no patrol car, and no hospital nearby. But when those amber eyes looked inside, she didn't see hunger or the curiosity of a hunting animal. She saw a deep sorrow, like a frozen lake beneath snow. The Bigfoot didn't look at Tom. She looked at Lisa's belly. Tom felt his wife's hand leave his and move to her stomach by reflex. It was the oldest gesture, a mother protecting the child who hadn't been born yet. Lisa didn't hide from that gaze, and she didn't push it away. She only kept her hand there, her palm open, her breath trembling lightly. The Bigfoot held the same position outside the window, long enough for Tom to begin counting each breath in his own chest. Snow kept falling over her shoulders. Wind kept sweeping across the white road. By the 10th breath, the creature blinked very slowly. Her gaze lifted to Lisa's face, then returned to her belly, as if she were recognizing something human language couldn't give her. Tom didn't know whether that moment was instinct, memory, or some kind of understanding beyond anything he had ever learned. He only knew that inside the car, Lisa stopped shaking for a few seconds. Then the Bigfoot backed away. She turned and walked toward the front of the car, where the headlights shone into the thick snow. Instead of disappearing back into the forest, she lowered herself and sat in the snow. Her back faced Tom and Lisa, and her face turned toward the white road and the dark tree line. Both long arms rested at her sides. Her shoulders still rose and fell with heavy breaths, but the posture was so clear it couldn't be misunderstood. She was keeping watch. For the first few minutes, Tom and Lisa only stared at that broad back. She sat motionless, blocking part of the headlights, making the space in front of the car look as if it had a living wall. Lisa breathed out very slowly, then closed her eyes. Tom turned toward her. "Lisa?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Pain moved across her face, not loud enough to become a cry, but strong enough to make both her hands clutch the edge of the blanket. 20 minutes later, she said the thing Tom had been trying not to think about. "This isn't back pain anymore." Tom turned the car light brighter, though it was still weak and yellow. He looked at his wife, then at the clock, then at the phone that still had no signal. The baby was coming tonight. Not in the hospital in Whitefish, not beside Eleanor's bed, where Lisa had hoped her mother would still be awake enough to hear the baby's name. The baby was coming in a car, trapped on Marias Pass, in the middle of a snowstorm, with an injured female Bigfoot sitting outside like the forest's gatekeeper. Tom wanted to panic. He had every right to panic, but Lisa looked at him, and in her eyes was an unspoken request. "Don't turn your fear into one more thing I have to carry." So Tom drew in a breath, nodded, and started doing the smallest things he could still control. He adjusted the heater, pulled the 2 blankets from the back seat, set his phone flashlight so it lit the cabin, opened the first aid kit, and gathered clean cloths, water, and anything else that looked useful. His hands shook so badly that he dropped the lid of the kit onto the floor. "Look at me," Lisa said. Tom stopped. "Do you remember that class last month?" she asked, trying to smile, even though her lips had gone pale. "They said the dad's only job was not to pass out." Tom let out a short laugh, tight and almost broken. "I'll try to exceed expectations." That small sentence kept him from falling into panic. He held Lisa's hand and told her they would take it 1 minute at a time, just like she had said before. He talked about breathing, about listening to his voice, about how she wasn't alone. He didn't know whether he was saying the right things in class, but his voice was the only thing he had to give her in that moment, so he used it like a rope, tying both of them to the present. Outside, the storm kept hitting the car. Snow slapped against the side windows, and the wind passed through the door seams with the sound of a distant train. Every time Tom looked through the windshield, the Bigfoot's back was still there, motionless, reddish-brown, broad shoulders covered in snow. At times, she turned her head slightly toward the trees on the left, as if hearing something in the night that humans couldn't hear. But she didn't leave her place. Time lost its shape. The dashboard clock moved from one number to the next, but Tom no longer understood how long a minute lasted. He only knew Lisa's contractions came and went, each one making her squeeze his hand until her nails pressed into his skin. He wiped sweat from her forehead with the corner of a cloth and told her she was doing well, that he was there, that their little girl was almost here. He called the baby their little girl without realizing it, as if, between the snow and the fear, the child had become a daughter who needed to be welcomed. At one point, Lisa cried. Not loudly. Tears only slipped from the corners of her eyes as she looked at the blue teddy bear lying beside the blanket. "My mom won't get to hear it," she said. Tom bent down and pressed his forehead to her hand. "She will," he said, even though he didn't know how. "If not tonight, then some other way. But she'll know." Near the middle of the night, the phone flashlight began to weaken, and the warmth inside the car became as precious as fire inside an ancient cave. Tom had to turn the engine off for a few minutes at a time to save gas, then start it again when Lisa began to shiver. Each time the engine turned over, the Bigfoot outside no longer startled. She had grown used to the car, as if it were some strange creature she had decided to guard. Sometimes, Tom thought she tilted her head slightly, listening to Lisa's breathing behind the layer of glass and metal. Then the moment came, not as an image, but as a sound. Right before it, there was a strange, short pause. The wind seemed to pull back. Lisa stopped squeezing his hand for one beat. Tom leaned close to her and said her name, his voice rough from fear and from speaking for so long. Then, inside that small car, amid damp blankets, warm breath and weak light, the first cry rang out. It was thin, sharp, so alive it cut straight through the dark. Tom froze inside his own body. Everything he had feared for hours, the wolves, the snowstorm, the vanished road, the dead phone signal, the distant hospital, all of it fell behind that tiny sound. Lisa began crying at once, a broken sound of exhaustion and relief. Tom cried too, though he didn't realize it until tears fell onto his hands. He kept saying, "She's here, she's here," as if he had to call the baby into this world with his voice. Outside the windshield, the female Bigfoot turned her head back. She didn't stand, she only turned enough to look toward the car. In the weak light, Tom saw those amber eyes reflect for a moment, then soften. There was no expression a human could name exactly, but Tom believed she had heard the cry, and that cry had touched a very deep place inside the creature sitting in the snow. Lisa held the baby in the blanket and Tom's coat, exhausted but awake. She looked through the windshield toward the large back outside. "Is she still there?" she asked. Tom looked too. The Bigfoot had turned back toward the forest. Her shoulders had collected more snow, but her posture hadn't changed. "Yeah," he said, his voice cracking softly. "She's still there." For the rest of the night, Tom barely looked away from Lisa and the baby. He was too busy keeping them warm, too busy saying whatever comfort he could find, too busy watching his wife's face under that weak light, as if he were seeing the most sacred thing in his life. But every time he glanced through the windshield, that large reddish-brown shape was still outside, sitting motionless in the snow. No one had asked her to protect them. Still, she stayed. The baby was born at 3:12 in the morning, inside a small car where fear and miracle had almost lost the line between them. Her first cry sounded stronger than Tom expected, thin but clear, cutting through the wind and snow hitting the windows. For a few seconds, he couldn't say anything. He only stood there, hands shaking, looking at Lisa, exhausted and still smiling. Then wrapped the baby in his thickest coat and placed her in his wife's arms. Lisa held the baby against her chest, tears running down both sides of her face. Tom sat beside her, one hand holding the blanket, the other touching the baby's forehead very lightly, as if one harder touch might make that fragile miracle disappear. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. There are moments when people cry, not because of pain, and not exactly because of joy, but because the body has no other way to hold everything that has just happened. Outside, the female Bigfoot still sat in front of the car, her back turned toward them, her shoulders covered in white snow. Tom looked at her through the windshield many times during the remaining hours of the night. Each time, he thought maybe she had gone. The reddish-brown shape was still there, motionless as a living stone. She didn't turn back to ask for anything, didn't try to touch the car, didn't make another sound. She only kept watch, facing the forest where the wolf pack had vanished. Close to 5 in the morning, the storm began to weaken. The wind no longer struck the car like it wanted to lift the whole vehicle off the ground. Snow fell more slowly now, still thick but softer, covering the roof, the glass, and every trace of the night. Lisa drifted in and out of brief sleep, the baby lying in her arms, wrapped in blankets and Tom's coat. Tom didn't dare sleep. He was afraid that if he closed his eyes, everything outside would disappear, and he would wake up inside a different reality, where no one could ever believe this story. When the sky began turning pale gray, Tom looked outside one more time. The place where the Bigfoot had sat was empty. In front of the car, there was only a deep circle pressed into the snow, so large that he could see it, even through the fogged glass. From that spot, giant footprints led toward the forest, each print spaced unbelievably far from the next, then faded under the fresh snow. Tom placed his hand against the cold windshield. He didn't know how to thank a creature that didn't need to hear thanks. The rescue team found them close to 7 in the morning. Eleanor Marsh, weak as she was, had woken in the hospital and asked the nurse to call her daughter. When no one answered, she insisted they notify the police. The patrol followed the route Tom and Lisa had planned to take, and one person in the group spotted the weak light from the car trapped on the side of the road. Tom opened the door when he heard people calling, his legs nearly giving out from exhaustion. Mother and baby were taken straight to the hospital in Whitefish. The doctor said both were healthy, though they needed monitoring and warmth. Tom sat beside Lisa's bed, still wearing his damp sweater and snow-caked shoes, watching his daughter sleep in a hospital blanket. He had spent the whole night being the person who had to keep everything from breaking, and only when he heard the doctor say both mother and child were safe did he lower his head and cover his face with both hands. That afternoon, Eleanor Marsh met her granddaughter for the first time. They wheeled her into the room in a hospital chair, her body looking smaller beneath the blanket. Lisa placed the baby in her mother's arms. Eleanor held the blue teddy bear in her other hand and stared at the baby for a long time without saying anything. No one rushed her. Tom stood by the door and saw her lips tremble, saw her eyes move from the baby's face to Lisa's. Finally, she only whispered, "She made it in time." They named the baby Eleanor. 3 weeks later, Eleanor passed away in her sleep on a quiet morning without snow. Lisa cried hard, but Tom knew there was a piece of peace inside that grief that she never would have had without that night's drive. Her mother had met the baby. She had heard her name passed on to a new life. Maybe that wasn't a victory over death, but it was one way love found its way around it. 2 months later, Tom read a short item in the Daily Interlake. A hunter had reported signs of a large, unidentified creature near Marias Pass in early December. The description suggested it may have been a smaller, not fully grown individual. No one identified it, no agency followed up. Tom read the paragraph again and again, then folded the paper down and looked out the window for a long time. He stood up and went to the nursery to pick up his daughter. Little Eleanor was asleep, one tiny hand loosely closed as if holding a private secret. Tom didn't tell the story of that night to his parents, or the neighbors, or the newspapers, or the police. Only he and Lisa knew. Every December, he still leaves a little food at the edge of the woods near their home, not knowing whether anything ever comes to take it. He doesn't need to know. What I think about most after this story isn't the sight of Bigfoot fighting wolves in the snow. That scene is fierce, frightening, and more than enough to stay with anyone. But what lingers longer in my mind is the moment she lifted the lead wolf, held it long enough for the pack to understand the hunt was over, then gently set it back down in the snow. She had won. She could have done more. She could have poured her anger into the animal that had attacked her. But she didn't. And right after that, she turned toward the car, walked to the window, and looked at the belly of a pregnant woman. I don't think that moment was simple curiosity from a wild creature. There was something deeper there, a form of recognition. An old grief touches a new life, a protective instinct that didn't need language to exist. In the natural world, we have seen many animals show the capacity for empathy, comfort, protection, and response to the pain of other living beings. Studies of elephants, dolphins, crows, and higher primates have made humans ask again and again whether emotion is truly ours alone. If those species can remember, mourn, protect, and share, then with a mysterious creature like Sasquatch, what might be happening behind those amber eyes that we still aren't patient enough to understand? So this is what I still wonder, if that female Bigfoot really had lost her young only weeks before that night, and if she stood between the wolf pack and a car carrying an unborn baby, then what was that? Instinct? Grief? Finding a new direction? Or a feeling human beings still don't have the right word to name? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe loss can create connection, even between beings that don't know each other's names? If this story touched something in you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This is Bigfoot Sasquatch Stories. I'm Victor. May the forest be gentle with you until the next story.